Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the September 19th meeting of the Stonington Planning and Zoning Commission. And good evening to all the commissioners. We call it to order at 7 p.m. I don't know why it says 8 o'clock up there. First item on the agenda is appoint alternates for this evening. I see, did Lynn say she was not going to be here this evening? Okay, so at this point, I'm going to appoint Bennett Brissett to act for Lynn Conway, and that will mean that myself, Ryan Deasy, Gary Belke, Andy Meek, and Bennett Brissett will be seated for this evening's meeting. We have minutes from the meeting of September 5th. What's the commission's pleasure on those?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the minutes number 1735 of September 5th, 2023 to be approved as written and submitted.
Second.
Thank you, Ryan. Made and seconded. Thank you, Ben. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Correspondence, do we have any correspondence? I know that there is some correspondence that we'll be getting to in the public hearing because it pertains to one of the items on the agenda, public hearing agenda. So I amend my statement. Bennett, you will get your opportunity to serve. And so seated this evening are myself, Ryan Deasy, Lynn Conway, welcome Lynn, Gary Belke, Andy Meek, and I did say myself. So, staff reports?
No staff reports, no commission reports, no zoning enforcement violations. So administrative review, first item, 2321, 7, zoning permit, Riverwalk Condominium Association, zoning permit application for the removal of cantilevered concrete deck, property located off 4 Cogswell Street /5 West Broad Street, Pawcatuck, map block lot 1-5-5, zone is PV5.
Thank you. Is there anyone here from Riverwalk Condominium Association? Sir? Would you please speak into the mic while you're addressing the board and the audience? It just makes it easier for everybody that's got to make minutes afterwards.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Good evening, Clifton. It's a simple matter. We have a structure that needs to be removed. We've received the approval and the permit from DEEP, which is required. We filed the forms with the clerk on the receiving of the documents into the town's information base. We've met with the town planner, and the proposed documents that we have here attached are reasonably simple. We intend to conform to all of the regulations of the town as it see fits, and I'm hoping, because our contractor has already been paid a deposit and has ready to go, that should we receive the approval we hope from the town today, we'll be able to move on this within the next week or so, and my goal is to complete the job by the 12th of October.
Very ambitious.
That's what we call wishful thinking.
Does that conclude you? How long did it take to get the DEP approval? Maybe we leave
I don't want
for
to
sidebar.
embarrass people who have petitions in for the last 2.5 years, but it took me less than 5 months. Mike Grzinski is a person that I met in 2006 when we had a similar project with the association at the river, and we knew each other. I was very fortunate to go to Hartford and sit with him in a building that normally has 1,800 people in it, and there were 4 of us.
Wow.
So it was a simple process. He helped us along the way, and we thank him. He is a very masterful person.
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that your presentation?
Excuse me, sir?
Does that conclude your presentation?
There is nothing more except the written things that we've put in.
Okay, thank you. Is
You're
there any
totally
questions
welcome.
from the commission? Any report from the staff at all on this?
Nothing additional.
Okay, there were some conditions on the motion. I guess at this point, you don't have any intention of reconstructing this, correct?
Absolutely no idea of doing it. We do know that if we were to ask for that, it would be an entirely brand-new permit request. It'd take almost forever to get it through DEEP, and for us, there's no need to do it,
Okay, thank you for your understanding on that.
of course.
So what's the commission's pleasure on this item 1 for Riverwalk Condominium Association?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the application as written and submitted with the 2 recommended stipulations. 1, modifications to the site development plan shall be reviewed and approved by town staff and the commission as necessary. And 2, the applicant shall apply for a new zoning permit for reconstruction of the walkway or any alterations to the proposed project description.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? No discussion on the motion? You heard that. Motion is made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Application passes.
Thank you,
sir.
Chair. Mrs. Rosen and I will be going home.
Thank you, sir. Item 2?
Next item is 23-216, zoning permit, Enco Realty LLC, zoning permit application for ground-mounted solar system, property located at 62 Maritime Drive, Mystic, map block lot 161-1-28E, zone M1.
Is there someone present from Enco Realty LLC? Evening, sir.
Good evening.
Evening.
I'm Alex from Earthlight, the solar contractor. Our plan is to install a ground-mounted solar array. It's just under 1 acre total ground coverage. We are planning to start the end of October, permit pending. The total install should take about 3 to 4 weeks. Is there any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Yes.
Commissioner Filbert?
Where's your interconnect going to be with the,
I'm sorry?
where's your interconnect going to happen?
That will interconnect at the electrical equipment that's outside of the building, just next to the transformer.
So on site?
Yes, on site. Yep.
Okay.
And you have everything in order with Eversource already?
Yes, yep, we have the interconnection application in with Eversource.
Thank you.
Yep.
No further questions?
Any further questions from any of the other commissioners? No further questions. What's the commission's pleasure on item 2?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the application as submitted with the 1 recommended stipulation that the final site plan shall be reviewed to the satisfaction of the town engineer.
Thank you, Ryan. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you, Barry. Motion is made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor of the Enco Realty application?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you all. The application passes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, item 6, old business.
Yep,
Clifton?
this is PZ 2314, special use permit, Janet LLC, special use permit application to permit construction of a 1-story, 3,300 square feet convenience store with 3 fueling stations and a canopy. Proposal includes parking, repaving, stormwater drainage, and associated site work. Property located at 54 South Broad Street, Pawcatuck, map block lot 14-2-6, zone LS5. The public hearing for this was closed at the last meeting on September 5th. At that meeting, following the closing of the public hearing, the commission instructed town staff to consult with the town attorney and address the following issues. I'm not going to read them in breadth. I'm just going to read the summary headline. Statement of relevancy for reference 4600. This is the previous legal opinion following the application from 2022 that was at the same site by the same developer that was withdrawn. Opinion on zoning regulation 2.11.2 exemption. This is the exemption or the 1,500-foot radius between gas stations exemption that would have gone with the legal nonconformity. 3, opinion on proposed parking counts, whether parking spaces at gasoline pumps count as parking spaces total for the project. And for gasoline station definition and special use permits, this is in relation to the convenience store being a second separate use. When I wrote and distributed the town staff report last Friday, I had not yet received a full opinion from the town attorney. I did receive an opinion from the town attorney this morning regarding those items, spelling it out in breadth. I've included it in the packets for the commission tonight. And then I also have copies with me in case anyone from the public is interested as well. But given the lack of time that's been able to be processed both by the commission and then the general public, I'm just recommending tabling this item until the next meeting. And I have no further report beyond that.
Thank you, Clifton. Is there a motion to continue to the next meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to continue this until the next scheduled hearing.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Gary Belkey. Thank you, Gary. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. It'll be continued till the next meeting. Brings us to the public hearing agenda. Commissioner Conway, if you don't mind doing the honors of reading the legal
Sure.
ad. Thank you.
Pursuant to the general statutes of the state of Connecticut, revision of 1958, and all amendments thereto, and pursuant to the zoning regulations of the town of Stonington, Connecticut, the Planning and Zoning Commission hereby gives notice that it will hold a public hearing at the Stonington Board of Education District Office, 40 Field Street, Pawcatuck, Connecticut, on Tuesday, September 19, 2023, at 7:00 p.m. on the following application: PZ 2319 SUPC Research Foundation, Inc., special use permit application for special wall signs pursuant to ZR 7.12.7.1.5 to permit 4 wall signs totaling 346.71 square feet, property located at 55 Coogan Boulevard, Mystic Assessments Map 164, Block 3, Lot 2, Zone TC 80.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before we ask the applicant to come forward, just describe the public hearing process briefly. The applicant is allowed to make a presentation. We hear from staff report. Clifton will give us his staff report on the item. Then we open it up to anyone who wishes to speak in favor or against, or just wants to address the board on the matter. We ask that you sign up on the sign-up sheet. And if you haven't signed up, I already have the sheet here, you're still allowed to speak. You know, I'll call up the people in order here. When the applicant is done, and we've heard the staff report, anyone who wishes to speak can speak. Anyone who wishes to speak in rebuttal gets an opportunity until all have said their piece. So that's the procedure for the public hearing. So is there anyone present from Sea Research Foundation, Inc.?
Yes, sir.
Attorney Sweeney, good evening.
Good evening, Mr.
Good
Chairman.
evening, sir.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Perfect.
Terrific. Good evening. For the record, my name is Bill Sweeney. I'm a land use attorney and a partner at the law firm of Tobin Carberry in New London, Connecticut. It's a pleasure, as always, to be here before you tonight. I have what I believe to be a very straightforward application, and hopefully one that won't take much time for you to review this evening. As part of my application, I did submit a number of color photos. I hope that you have those, and those are part of your package. And I do have some additional copies if anybody doesn't have them with them, but I will be referring to them in my presentation. Joining me tonight is Keith Sorensen and Rosalie Siegel from Mystic Aquarium as well. The subject application before you tonight entails the installation of 4 special wall signs pursuant to section 7.12.7.1.5 of the zoning regulations at the front entrance of Mystic Aquarium. This new sign project is part of an effort to bring the existing entry signage for the aquarium into zoning compliance. Historically, the entry signage to the aquarium has consisted of a variety of signs from a variety of different eras, and many of which do not comply with current signage requirements as laid forth in your zoning regulations. We've included some photos that show a progression of signage over the last several years. Sea Research Foundation, which is the entity behind Mystic Aquarium, voluntarily began to streamline and remove some of the clutter of signage at their front entrance, reducing the overall wall sign square footage from 762.64 square feet in 2018 to 586.06 square feet in 2023. Currently, the aquarium building has 321.33 feet of linear frontage on Clara Drive and 381.25 feet of linear frontage on Coogan Boulevard. Under your zoning regulations, the amount of wall signage a building can have is based on those frontages. And doing a quick calculation, the aquarium is entitled to a total amount of wall signage in the amount of 351.29 square feet. Our application before you tonight would reconfigure and further reduce the existing wall signage to bring it into compliance with the regulations, actually reduce the square footage of total wall signage to 346.71 square feet. And again, that would bring us into compliance. The new wall signage would consist of four different signs. The first, to the left of the entrance, and you can see this in the last page of my handout, is a 135 square foot revolving exhibit sign. This is a sign that will change periodically. The aquarium has revolving exhibits that come through, and that area will be able to be changed, whether it's about jellyfish or whether it's about whales or penguins, and be able to shift over time, which is really important for museums and facilities like aquariums to have new and fresh exhibits. The second and third sign are an 18 square foot and a 46.66 square foot membership and information signs. If you're familiar with the aquarium now, to the right of the main entrance is sort of their membership and ticketing area, those signage, and again, that's shown on the last page of my handout. Those signs will exist in those areas and stay within the dotted lines that we show. The final sign is a 147.05 square foot primary identification sign. Rather than sort of the clutter of all the signs that we have over the front entrance, we're really trying to consolidate it, make it look a lot cleaner, a lot fresher. And so this primary identification sign would consist of internally illuminated letters on a black aluminum metal sign frame. The two illuminated letters would occupy only 14.89% of the total sign area, which complies with your requirements for illuminated signage in section 7.12.3.1. We also will turn this sign off. These are LED lit letters with like a Lexan plastic frosted coating. This sign will be turned off at 11 p.m. daily, so it's not something that's on all night. It'll be shut off each day. 3 of our signs exceed 18 square feet in area. That's the maximum limit in the commercial zone for a sign under your current regulations. So this special permit is required under your regulations to allow for signs bigger than that size, provided that we stay under the total signage that's allowed, and that's what we're doing. We're actually bringing a non-conforming condition into compliance. I think, from our perspective, the wall signs significantly reduce the clutter of the existing entry signage. You have signs from varying different ages and various different projects at the aquarium. Makes it much cleaner, makes it much fresher. It certainly makes it look much more professional, and most importantly, for your perspective, it brings it into complete zoning compliance. We don't believe there's any traffic or safety concerns as a result from the signs. The signage that we're talking about is approximately 300 feet set back from Coogan Boulevard, and so there you have a very large parking lot in front of that, so there's no concerns about traffic or distraction to drivers. And again, we have requested some waivers. Obviously, this is a very limited project. There's no building additions. There's no residential units involved. So a lot of your typical special permit requirements, we have requested a waiver from. Both myself, Mr. Sorensen, and Ms. Siegel are available if you have any specific questions. But that concludes my presentation tonight. And certainly happy to answer any questions you have, and we would reserve the right of rebuttal.
Thank you, Attorney Sweeney. Any questions from the board?
May I have one of your extra packets, please?
Sure. Of course. Anybody else need one?
All set. Any other questions? Lynn, are you okay with somebody else asking a question while you look at those? Okay, thank you. John, do you have questions?
Is the revolving sign, the 135 square foot, is that an electronic
No.
sign that revolves?
No, it'll actually be physically replaced on a rotating basis.
And is that backlit as well?
No, it's not illuminated. The only illuminated sign
Is the big one?
are the marquee letters on the primary identification line. And you have very strict rules about how much of a sign can be illuminated. So on page 3 of my handout, we actually do all the calculations. And so to show that we are under that 15%.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
How far, so the sign that's lit,
Yes.
how far away from the building will you be able to see that sign?
How far away will you be able to see it? If you're out there now, there is pretty extensive landscaping within the parking lot. I would say that you would be able to see pieces of that from Coogan Boulevard. If you look through the trees, I measured it today on the GIS from the edge of curb to the face of the building where that sign is 287 feet. So that's a fairly large distance from a zoning perspective, much farther beyond the front yard setback, for example, that's required for the TC 80 zone.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Attorney Sweeney. Staff?
No additional comments. This was circulated to the Police Commission and Zoning Enforcement Officer as well, who have provided no comment. And that would be more in relation to, is this opposing danger or distraction to others? So they had no comment, and Planning Department also had no comment on the project.
Thank you, Clifton.
I do have one additional question. I'm so sorry.
Go right ahead, please.
So, I'm sorry.
Is it up, Attorney Sweeney?
Yes,
Okay.
please. What are the hours of the aquarium?
So I don't make a mistake, I'm going to ask Keith to come up and answer that question.
If you could just state your name for the record, sir, and you can give the address of the business.
Will do. Keith Sorensen, Senior Vice President, Facilities and Capital Projects, Mystic Aquarium, 55 Coogan Boulevard, Mystic, Connecticut.
Evening to you.
Thank you. Same to you and the rest of the commissioners. So the question was our hours of operation, which are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. this time of year. And then in the summer, it extends to 6 p.m. Those are the normal business hours. We are open after hours on not a regular basis for events that, the organization, the buildings and the grounds can be booked by different organizations for a variety of events and so forth. All of those events are over by 11 o'clock.
Thank you, sir.
And so is the primary function of the sign to let people know that they've arrived at the Mystical Aquarium?
That is correct, yes.
So what I heard was that the sign would be turned off at 11 o'clock at night, and I didn't hear when the sign would be turned on.
It'll have automatic controls so that it comes on at dusk.
At dusk?
Yes.
So 5 during the winter and 8 during the summer? In the
Roughly,
evening?
yes. It'll be tied into a photo cell type
Okay.
sensor.
Okay. So I'm just, I'm just wondering about the hours of operation of the sign. I do realize you do have events sometimes, certainly not every weekend or every night. So is there a reason that you would have the sign on after working hours?
Sure. Especially in the summer, a lot of people travel through Mystic on the roads and so forth. We want people to know where we are, especially people that are staying at the hotel, for instance. They'll be able to, they'll drive by it, they'll see it, and so forth. People just visiting the area, we want people to know where we are.
But you're not going to be able to see the sign from the street?
As our attorney Sweeney said, yes, from bits to, depending on, where you're looking from. If you stop your car at a certain place, for instance, or looking from across the street at from the Hilton, you'll be able to see the sign, just like we can see the Hilton sign from the aquarium.
Okay. But the Hilton is open 24/7, whereas your facility is open from 9 to 6 the majority of the time.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further questions for this applicant?
I have a question. So I'm not sure who this question is addressed to, but this was a legally non-conforming situation with the signs as it was,
I can answer that question.
correct?
So it's not clear whether it was legally non-conforming, some of the signs.
Okay,
So the initial approach to the town was that we were going to do this as a reduction of a nonconformity, which can be done without planning commission approval. The aquarium was built in the 1970s, and so we worked with Candy Palmer to pull all the files for the aquarium going back as far as the town has files going back. We could not find necessarily a sign permit for every sign that is out there today. And it appears to me, and I think your planner would agree, that some of the signage may have been approved as part of renovations, and there was a project in the late 80s and early 90s for a major rework of the aquarium where the signage may have been worked into the expansion. Bottom line is we couldn't necessarily tie a permit to every sign that's there. And so talking with Mr. Eiler, it was suggested that in an abundance of caution, we should come before the commission and seek a special permit to validate everything, even though we were certainly reducing our overall signage. And so the idea was to clean it up. But your point, I think the point you might be coming to is that certainly that's an argument we could have taken, but we thought it would be better just to come in and make it a clean special permit application.
and that makes sense to me. I was more, the reason I was asking whether it was a legal nonconformity was to find out if there would be a sort of backdoor to have a legally non-conforming sign situation again in the future, but from what you're saying, it doesn't sound that way.
No, and in fact, even if there was, our application to reduce the signage before you is affirmative proof of our intent to abandon any nonconformities.
We are so familiar with that term.
Yeah,
right
I
there.
know you're dealing with that with another project, so I'm very much aware of that. The aquarium has had a long-standing relationship of cooperation and partnership with the town.
Yeah.
We don't pick fights. What we try to do is work with the town. And so when Mr. Eiler suggested, hey, let's just clean this up, come in with a special permit, you're clearly reducing. I think everybody would agree that the signage we're proposing looks a lot better than what's there today. Mm-hmm. This is a win-win for the community. So just come in and let's start with a fresh approval. All the signs are going to be approved under this permit, and we don't have to worry about 40 years of signage under 40 different planners and zoning officers. Just clean it up all at once.
Understood. Thank you.
Any further questions?
I have one more.
Mr. Philbin?
Is there signage at the C Research Building, the Milne?
There is, but signage is done by a building-by-building basis. So what we did is, the analysis we did is based just on the aquarium
one.
building. Yeah, exactly. Now, and your signage comes from each frontage that you have. So
Right.
if you have, this is effectively a corner lot. You wouldn't think that, but it is.
No, it is, yeah.
And you don't get to count I-95 by the regulations, but you do get to count Clara Drive, and you get to count Coogan. So, and again, I think the most important message I want to leave you with is that if approved and once implemented, we will actually bring our signage into conformity
Right.
with your regulations as they stand today, which I think, one of your primary purposes is to try to bring non-conforming properties into a conforming status. That's what we're doing. And I do think it looks a lot nicer, what's being proposed. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions of Attorney Sweeney? Hearing none, I don't have anyone signed up for this public hearing, but would anyone else like to speak in either in favor of, or opposed to, or just make a general comment? Anyone else like to speak? I see none. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you. Ryan? Is there a second?
Second the motion.
Second by Gary Belkey. Thank you, Gary. Any discussion on the motion? Were there any waivers that had to be approved with this?
Yeah, there are some.
Yes, they're listed in the staff
Should we,
report.
should we have done those first, actually?
No, you would be voting
You can
on
include it
both.
with the motion?
You would make a decision on the waivers requested and a decision on the special
Special
use
use, so
permit.
two.
Okay, so it's
But
all.
you could
all-
combine them into one
Okay.
motion.
Oh, okay.
That's fine. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none?
Are you just closing?
Yeah, we're just closing the hearing. Yeah.
I apologize. Motion to close. It's seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? What's the commission's pleasure on that?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the waivers requested and also to approve the special use permit as written and submitted with no stipulations.
We have a motion to approve the waivers. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Gary Belkey. Any discussion on the motion?
Would an option be to approve each sign separately?
I think we've got a motion to approve
Yeah.
the waivers.
Yeah.
You object to
The waivers?
Yeah, I move to approve of the waivers and also the special use
Okay.
permit application. Do you want me to separate them? I can do that and withdraw my motion.
Normally, I think the application doesn't have standing until the waivers are really approved.
Okay.
But Clifton, if you disagree with that and it can be
The
combined.
special use permit is for all of the signs. You wouldn't approve the signs individually.
Okay. So this motion can go forward.
Correct.
Okay.
And the commission has set past precedent of approving a project with the waivers as part of one motion, so you don't have to do them separately either.
That's the way our attorneys told us to do it in other jurisdictions, but that's a old ruling, so I'll go along with your advice on that. So I guess they're considered together.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any discussion on the motion of the waivers and the approval of the special use permit?
Yes. So, a couple things. The square footage that is being proposed takes into account the fact that it's a corner lot, which has been explained to us. But all the signs are only on one side of the building. So I think that's just important to take into consideration here. So it's almost double the signage that would be, you know, in one area. It's all concentrated in one area, which makes it, in a way, more signage, if you look at it that way. And the other thing I want to point out is the 147 square foot is 8 times the amount of square footage that's allowed. So our signage is, I believe, what the attorney said was 18 square feet. This one was 147 square feet, and this is an illuminated sign. It's not just a flat sign, and it's 8 times, not double, not triple, but 8 times what our regs currently allow. So I think it's an extreme. You know, I think that the hours of operation of the aquarium are 9 to 6, probably 80% of the time, and I think that's generous, saying that 20% of the time there's an evening event that would go to 11. So I'm not quite sure that we need to have that illumination until 11 o'clock at night, and I think the sign is too large.
Any other comments? Anyone have any other items under discussion? We have a motion, it's been seconded. All in favor of the motion to approve Sea Research Foundation's special use permit applications for special wall signs?
Approved.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, we have one member opposed, everyone else is aye. The motion passes. The application's approved. Thank you, Attorney Sweeney. Next item on the agenda is Town of Stonington Planning and Zoning Commission, adoption of Phase 1 of the zoning regulations, comprehensive rewrite. Commissioner Conway, if you could read the legal notice.
The Town of Stonington Planning and Zoning Commission, adoption of Phase 1 of the zoning regulations, comprehensive rewrite, excuse me.
Okay. So basically the same procedures are in effect for this public hearing. Our presenter is actually going to be online, I believe.
There are going to be 2 presenters tonight, myself and then, yes, Francisco Gomes from FHI Studio.
Okay. And Francesco is online, correct?
Yes, he is.
He is, okay.
I am.
I believe he's broadcasting live from Nova Scotia, is it, Francisco?
That is
Or you
correct.
prefer not to disclose your location?
That is, for the record, that is my current location.
Okay. So the presenter will present, we will have staff input, and then input from members of the audience. I have several people that have signed up. If you have not signed up, you know, you may still speak. After I've called everyone, I'll ask if there's anyone else that wants to speak on this application. Anyone who has spoken either for or against will have rebuttal time until everyone has spoken and said their piece. So with that in mind, we will proceed. Clifton?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the commission. It's going to be weird me presenting an application while sitting in this chair, but we're going to go along with it. Again, thank you for being here tonight so we can present Phase 1 of our zoning regulations. The Town of Stonington is pleased to present the Phase 1 of our zoning regulations rewrite for a public hearing. This moment has been eagerly awaited by many in the commission, town staff, and the community. We hope the commission will consider adopting the amended zoning regulation before you tonight. These updated regulations have been carefully crafted to replace our existing outdated regulations with a new user-friendly document that meets the highest legal standards and best practices established by case law. These regulations also maintain alignment with Stonington's plan of conservation and development, showing the Commission's commitment to modernize and improve our zoning regulations to better serve our community. Over the past few years, town staff has worked tirelessly to secure funding for this effort. In May 2022, the town of Stonington contracted Fitzgerald & Holiday, Inc., FHI Studio, to lead this multi-phased process. Without FHI Studio's dedicated work over the past year and a half, this achievement wouldn't have been possible. The town commends the consulting team for their efforts thus far and looks forward to continuing work after Phase 1 adoption. The purpose of the zoning regulations rewrite is multifaceted. Our current regulations suffer from various issues, including inconsistencies in language, non-compliance with recent statutory changes, errors, ambiguities, and excessive length, among others. Our goals in the process were clear. Number one, relevance and modernization. The updated regulations replace outdated ones to better address our evolving community needs and priorities. They are designed for clarity and accessibility, ensuring they can be understood by staff, commissioners, property owners, developers, and the general public. Two, statutory compliance. The amended regulations fully comply with all relevant statutory requirements, reducing the potential for disputes and legal challenges. Three, alignment with case law. We considered legal precedent to ensure the updated regulations align with best practices, reducing ambiguity and promoting fairness in the zoning process. Four, consistency with the plan of conservation and development. The amended regulations align closely with the goals and objectives outlined in Stonington's plan of conservation and development, promoting sustainable development and enhancing our residents' quality of life. Five, transparency and public involvement. We ensured the development of the updated regulations were conducted in an open and transparent environment. We have conducted all mandatory reviews, hearings, and consultations, ensuring that the community has had ample opportunity to provide input and feedback throughout the process. However, our process doesn't conclude here. In Phase 2, our focus is to address more significant concerns, contemplate substantial amendments, and bring our regulations in line with contemporary planning best practices. We aspire to sustain our partnership with FHI Studio to enhance and streamline our regulations further. Our commitment to an open dialogue with the public remains steadfast as we seek opportunities for regulatory enhancements. Consequently, we kindly request that the Planning and Zoning Commission consider approving these zoning regulation amendments with the acknowledgement that we plan to launch a subsequent phase for future amendments guided by community input and involving requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the extent of your comment?
That's the extent of my presentation, and then I'm going to turn it over to Francisco online, who's going to go through more of a robust presentation for the members of the public, just to outline what we did, how we got to where we are today, and then potentially where we're going to go after this.
Okay. Then at this time, we'll turn it over to Francisco Gomez.
All right, thank you, Clifton. And can you all see and hear me clearly? And can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, very good. First of all, for the record, Francisco Gomes with FHI Studio. As Clifton mentioned, we're the consultant that was hired for this work. And let me give credit where credit is due. We've had a commission that's been thoroughly and completely engaged in this process for more than a year. And it's their diligence to this process, their commitment to the process, and their willingness to work late into the evening on a regular basis that has made it possible for us to be here now. And that includes current and former commission members. So I'd like to thank them and this body for their participation in this process. I have a very brief presentation. Clifton covered some of the ground already, but we want to make sure that we're clearly communicating the purpose of this effort and what is involved and what is ahead. So that being said, my agenda is very brief. I'll once again review the purpose of this update, talk about our process, and then talk a little bit about the updated regulations that are before you. As Clifton mentioned, the current zoning regulations were originally adopted in 1961. So it's been more than 50 years and have been updated on a piecemeal basis by multiple authors since then, by applicants proposing an amendment, by commissions, by staff, volunteering amendments. And the document basically reads as such. Our purpose is to unify that document to one cohesive narrative and organization that provides a user-friendly set of regulations that are accessible to a wide audience. So that being staff, commission members, the general public, applicants, the legal community, whoever needs to use these regulations. And of course, we want to make sure that they're fully compliant with statute as it currently stands and best practices as established by case law in Connecticut and in the federal courts. As Clifton mentioned, this update corrects many issues that were the town and the commission was aware of before we started the process and that we uncovered as we began the process. First of all, there's inconsistent language and terminology. There's currently lack of compliance with recent statutory changes. There are many errors, inconsistencies, ambiguities, and omissions. The page length it's an excessively long document for a small to medium-sized town at 348 pages. It lacks illustrations, and the illustrations that it does have are low quality. It has an incomplete list of definitions. 46 of 98 uses, by example, are not defined. Many references are dated. Subsections are in illogical sections or sequences. There's redundancy, information that is repeated, the same information repeated throughout the document, and awkward and cumbersome wording in many sections. So there are a number of issues. These are the major issues that we've found and that we're currently trying to correct. This update has been led by the Planning Department, and the Planning and Zoning Commission have been our steering committee for the project, as is their authority and duty under statute. We have conducted monthly virtual meetings that have been open to the public, and that has been occurring since July of last year. All meeting recordings are currently available on the town website. We have also, over the past couple of months, conducted public meetings to discuss the changes that have been made in this update. And that began with the July 26th virtual public meeting, and last month with an in-person public meeting in the very room that you're in this evening. And we had very active and engaged attendees at both sessions. Now, in addition to this draft being made available to the public online and at the town clerk's office, we have distributed the draft of the regulations to multiple boards and commissions, including ZBA, Architectural Design Review Board, Climate Change Task Force, Stormwater Committee, and we've have conducted required submissions to SCCOG and to DEEP. And I'm happy to report that SCCOG found that this draft would have no adverse impact on surrounding communities and provided a favorable review of the draft zoning regulations. And in my discussions with Connecticut DEEP, they saw no issues, mainly because we haven't changed any of the coastal zone regulations. And we have communicated with them, to them, the fact that we will be engaging in a second phase of this work, where we will take a much closer look at coastal zone regulations, regulations that are applicable to your zoning districts along the coastline, along your shore, and we will likely be more engaged with Connecticut DEEP at that point. To date, they have provided no comment because we have not proposed any changes to those regulations. And as I noted, these this set of regulations, this draft was posted with the town clerk on August 18th, so a little more than a month ago. As I mentioned, and as Clifton noted, we are taking a phased approach to this update. And to draw an analogy, I liken it to repairing a house with a bad foundation. And that's the way we've thought of this approach. We know that the current regulations, the way they're organized, and with the multiple issues that I've noted, provide a very unsound foundation for major amendments to the regulations. And if you had a home with an unsound foundation, before you put it on a second floor addition or redid the kitchen, you would address the foundational issues, right? You would fix, correct, improve, secure, and structurally reinforce that foundation. That's exactly what phase one is intended to do, is to provide a strong foundation for more work to come. So the scope of this purpose or the scope and purpose of this phase is to address those errors and inconsistencies, to improve the organization of the document, the formatting, the ease of use, and do as much as we can in this phase to bring it into compliance with statute and best practices. The benefit of this approach is that it has allowed us to immediately jump in to addressing these issues that we know are here and now, and that staff and the commission has been working through over the past several years and is well aware of. So we've been able to immediately work towards correcting those issues, and we've presented those corrections in this draft. This will enable us to move on to a subsequent phase that will allow us to explore and dive much deeper into various topics. So those topics may or may not include amending uses allowed in districts, considering allowing additional uses or prohibiting uses that are currently allowed, potentially amending permit requirements for uses, whether it be a zoning permit, a special permit, what the site plan requirements are, potentially revising district boundaries, consolidating or eliminating districts, potentially amending bulk area and height standards. We know we need to update parking and signage standards, and there are other potential amendments that may come to light as being a necessity. Our phase two process is intended to start this fall. It is our intention to adopt the phase one revisions of the zoning regulations and to put them into effect. And while doing so, launch our phase two work. In our phase two work compared to phase one over the past year, we'll engage the public to a greater extent because we will be dealing with far more substantive issues. So we do anticipate conducting several public workshops, very likely in person, maybe some virtual. And those workshops are likely to be topic-based, but they could and may also be geographic-based. So we may identify an area of town to focus on, or a particular zoning district. And we will likely also conduct workshops based upon topics like signage, housing, parking, or any other issue that we feel deserves specific attention. These workshops are going to be promoted. They'll be announced on the town website and local media. If you have participated in any of our prior meetings and have provided your name or email address, we will send out an invite to all email addresses that we've received at prior events. And it is really our intention to open this up to a wide audience. So I'd like to talk about the draft regulations that are before you this evening. And these regulations are likely to appear, and we believe this will be the foundation for which any changes in phase 2 will be carried by. Meaning, this format, this organization, this basic structure of the regulations will not change significantly. What will change is what's allowed in the specific lines of regulation. But the general organization and structure of the document will be continued through phase 2. So what we're looking at in this example that I have on the screen is the look, the feel, and the general layout that will be carried forward through any future amendments. The new layout, I hope you find that it is user-friendly and easy on the eye. We presented the commission with multiple options to choose from with respect to formatting, nomenclature, graphic design, etc. And this one was selected as being the most user-friendly and the most adaptable. And this organization has really simplified the regulations and condensed them without removing any regulation that is really functional. So first of all, very briefly on the formatting of the page, these regulations I hope you will find much easier to navigate because they have section headings at the top of the page in the header. They have reference tab for the articles at the bottom of the page. The sections are provided with a bold blue bar to divide sections. And the nomenclature system is very simple and straightforward. There are 3 numerical digits it's limited to before it moves to letters. So it's a very, I think, intuitive format and system. And it's also flexible enough to allow for ongoing additions, revisions, and amendments without upsetting the apple cart here. So in summary, the updated regulations regulate land use and development as authorized by and in compliance with Connecticut General Statute Chapter 124, which gives the town its zoning authority. And they are up to date, to the best of our knowledge, with other statutory requirements that were in effect at the time this draft was provided to the town clerk and put forward. They effectively reflect and support the community's visions and goals as established by the Plan of Conservation and Development. We did review at the onset of this work your Plan of Conservation and Development and all relevant planning documents to ensure that any changes made were consistent with the vision and goals of those plans. And I'm happy to say the POCD supported updates to the zoning regulations, advocates for it in many places within the document. And we are following through on that. The POCD advocates for the town to take a much more thorough and thoughtful approach to regulating land use, and that will be continued through our phase 2 work. The draft regulations are user-friendly for all parties and for a wide audience. They are structured to allow for ongoing amendments. They use consistent format and a consistent language throughout. The redundancies have been kept to an absolute minimum. They provide clear and useful illustrations and provide a complete and comprehensive list of definitions. The new organization sees a reduction in page count from 348 pages to 212. We still organize the document by article, but we've reduced it down to 7 articles plus an appendices. As I mentioned, the illustrations have been updated. They are very legible, consistent throughout, placed next to or within proximity of the governing regulations, and I think are very intuitive and legible. And finally, we've provided a record of amendments, which is placed in Appendix 1, that allows for cross-referencing of the draft regulations to the existing regulations. And in addition to providing that cross-referencing, we've identified any sections that have been eliminated. We've identified all regulatory amendments, meaning wherever we changed what was allowed, whether it was a quantity, the wording, which changed the effect of what was allowed. We have documented that in this record of amendments. And we have also documented all of the new definitions that have been added. We've identified those where definitions have been revised. We've noted that and provided reference to the old definition for comparison. So with that being said, that concludes my presentation, and I'd like to return the microphone to the commission. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Francisco. Clifton, any comments?
So, Mr. Chair, I want to provide a couple items as exhibits. Two were included in your packets, one being the letter from SCCOG, and then the other being the letter from the Economic Development Commission. I did make a clerical error and not include the letter we did receive from the Climate Change Task Force, but that is included in your packets that's before you tonight, as well as an exhibit here. And then in addition, I do also have exhibits from 4 other individuals, 1 Alan and Christy Head, 2 1 White, 3 Don Sadowski, and 4 Christopher Smith. Again, for the members of the public, if you're interested in looking at those, I have those exhibits here as well. So, and with that, no other comments were provided. As Francisco mentioned, we're still waiting on deep comments, but it's more likely than not that we're not going to receive any comments related to that just until we start phase 2. So take that as you will.
Are we also still waiting for comments from other commissions within the town that have not yet responded?
We did send this around to the other boards and commissions, as Francisco mentioned. Haven't received any comments on those tonight. I was at the Flood Prevention, Climate Change and Erosion Control Board this meeting this evening, and they didn't provide any comment one way or another. They supported the application as it currently is.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions of Clifton before we open it up to the public for comment?
Not a question, just to point out, they went to the zoning enforcement official also, and she did make comments on it. So just I haven't seen it noted, but
Good
they
point,
were
Gary.
reviewed there as well.
Are there any questions of Francisco from the commission regarding his presentation before we open it up to the public?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question. I'd just like to say thank you very much to Francisco and his team for the incredible work they've done to get us this far. I know he thanked us, but he's really kind of led us through this process and made it very, very easy and, a painless process as much as it can be doing something like this. So I just want to say thank you to Francisco and his team.
I echo those comments and extend my thanks as well to Francisco. He's done an outstanding job. I don't think he's missed a single meeting, and he always follows up immediately on anything we ask him to follow up on. So he's been a very diligent consultant, and that's been evident from the beginning. So if there are no further questions of Francisco or Clifton, we will open it up to the public, and the first name on the list is Ben Tamsky. Evening, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, really, I just want to also thank Francisco and the commission for just doing a superb job on this. I'm really couldn't have asked for a better outcome here. I think you guys used a light touch for phase 1, saving the heavy lift for phase 2, but it's just no substantive changes, just cleaning everything up and particularly taking the discretion pretty much away from the commission and bringing it up to compliance with statute, I think, is to be commended. 2 small points that I was concerned about. One was 6.3.10, item D and E. parking, off-street parking up to 20 spaces, not needing a special use permit. I'm not sure what that was changed from, but to me it seems excessive. Always looking out for neighborhoods, particularly neighborhoods bordering industrial and commercial zones, and 20 spaces added to a parking lot can have a considerable impact on a neighborhood, particularly where buffers don't exist or where a buffer might, you might not have a buffer because the zone is divided by a narrow street or something, so buffers aren't required. So I think maybe you want to take a better look at the parking. At the public comment meeting last month, there was mention of fee waivers for some types of reconstruction or something. I think that that's out of your jurisdiction. I think fees are controlled by the Board of Selectmen through the town meeting process. That's my understanding. So, and if you'll indulge me, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to read a letter that I submitted back in May. It really deals with Phase 2, but I think as an introduction at this point, since you have talked about Phase 2, if I could just very briefly.
Please do. While you're distributing that, I should note for, I don't have to note it for the commission, but for the audience, you were at almost every one of our monthly meetings on this, so I thank you for your participation.
Thank you. Commissioners, Stonington is suffering from a lack of affordable housing options. There are many avenues available to this commission to help alleviate this problem. Changes to the zoning regulations that will allow added density and therefore more new residential construction in selected areas are a necessary step in this direction. Greater flexibility in ADUs, such as elimination of architectural design review board review, and even eliminating the need for an SUP, would be a good start. Lowering minimum lot sizes in zones served by public sewer and water is another idea that has been discussed. We favor consideration of all of those solutions, but fear that in some areas of town, all new construction that could otherwise ease our rental housing crisis will just be built out for short-term rentals, or STRs. It is for this reason, therefore, that we are reaching out to this commission to take action to rein in the growth of short-term rentals. We believe that the Planning and Zoning Commission could easily adopt new language as a text amendment that would ban non-owner occupied STRs in town, while still allowing for owner-occupied rentals of any duration. Traditional shoreside communities, such as Lord's Point, could continue past rental practices through the establishment of overlay zones. These are a few of the ideas that are floating around at present, and we hope that you will plan the discussion of this issue in the very near future. It was last discussed by this commission in 2017, and nothing was done following the preference of the former director of planning. We feel that it is past time to take a fresh look at this problem that continues to grow with each passing season. I don't know whose this is. Not mine. Anyway, signed Ben Tamsky, Planning and Zoning Commission Chair 2013 to 2015, John Swenerton, PZC Chair 2009 to 2011, John Prue, PZC Chair 2015 to 2016, and David Rathbun, PZC Chair 2016 to 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. And I assure you that that issue has our attention in Phase 2.
Thank you.
As was stated, it was not within the scope of Phase 1, but it certainly has our full attention.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for
You
your
have a
comment.
signed copy of that, I believe, on file in the planning office.
Many thanks.
Thanks.
Rick Newton. Evening, sir.
Rick Newton, I chair the Climate Change Task Force. I don't imagine that you've had an opportunity to look too much at the information that we sent in, but we were asked to comment on Phase 1, so we did. As a task force, As a task force, we don't really have any power. We can only make recommendations. The power for addressing climate change rests with your commission and your members. And there are some improvements that could be made in the regulations. I imagine that probably most of this will go into phase 2. But we were asked to comment for phase 1, so we did. A couple of specific comments on 1.1.c. Your wording says impacts of sea level rise. We provide alternate language for that because it's more than sea level rise. And if you could look at that. 12.4.10.a, generators within 50 feet of residential building should have soundproofing around them. I live, I've got 3 generators surrounding my house, and when they all go on, it's just really loud. 13.5, we recommend 10 parking spaces instead of 30. This is for the EV requirement. 6.3.14, we like that it was added, but you're going to need something for canopy solars over parking lots. And the 15-foot requirement is probably going to be too low for canopies over parking lots for the clearance of emergency vehicles and other things. And eventually school buses are going to be electrified, and they'll need solar canopies probably over them. So 15 feet won't cut it for a school bus, I don't believe. The main thing that a lot of towns are looking at is, elimination of fossil fuels. Pretty much everyone that is, well, not everyone, but majority of scientists are in agreement we have to eliminate fossil fuels. We have to electrify everything. So your regulations could do that. There are towns in Massachusetts now. Massachusetts authorized a pilot program for 10 towns to electrify everything. They won't allow fossil fuels on any new or substantial improvements. And there's 15 towns that want to do it, and they're only allowing 10 to do it. And it's happening around the country, and I wouldn't be surprised if Connecticut legislature came up with some regulation that required that. As far as flooding and sea level rise, there's a Yukon Circa recommendation to municipalities to resist development in the floodplain. We've allowed development in the floodplain. There are municipalities, such as Middletown, they don't allow it. They just don't allow development in their floodplains. And that's because the risk to the town is in the future. Basically, when you approve something in a floodplain, you're telling the applicant that for 75 years, we believe that this is going to be fine and it's not going to be affected by flooding. And that's just not the case anymore. There's just about every day, there's some flooding around the world that is wiping out cities and towns. If you didn't want to outright ban it, you could adjust the base flood elevation to be higher. The circa, for planning purposes, is 20.5 inches. That, I believe that's supposed to be updated this year. I expect that to go up based on the sea level rise calculations around the world. And one major thing that you're lacking is any regulations regarding heat. Heat is going to kill more people before sea level rise will. And there are ways that zoning regulations can accommodate better reducing heat in sections of the town that need it. You can do eco roofs, and I gave you some examples from New Haven. You can look at those. And then finally, wind. There are higher standards for wind from the Institute for Business Home and Safety Fortified Standards. You could adopt those if you wanted to, even though Connecticut ranks pretty high in their building regulations. You can always go higher, and we have a lot of old buildings along the coast. When they get renovated, they should be brought to the highest standard that is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And we have all received and read your thoughtful letter, and it's a very good start for a phase 2 discussion, and I assure you we'll be in contact. Okay? Thank you, sir. Jim Lathrop. Evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you to the commission and to the chair. I had a conversation with Clifton earlier today, and I wanted to stop by tonight to talk a little bit about some of these phase 1 changes, and it's really just one in particular. And regrettably, I did not participate in some of the earlier public sessions. The reason I didn't is that I thought this was going to be basically a reorg and statutory compliance type stuff. Taking a look after Clifton pointed me in the right direction of the appendix, I found something that really didn't align with that, and it concerned me. It's 5.3.25.d, which limits street-facing first floors to commercial uses. And I get what the commission is trying to do here, is trying to preserve commercial uses of buildings in downtown areas. I think that's what they're trying to accomplish. But it doesn't seem like this aligns with making the document easier to read and understand, nor statutorily compliant, nor compliant with case law. Well, this 5.3.25.d seems innocuous. It does actually affect properties in some of the downtown areas, including some that I own. There is a lot of nuance in what you do on the first floor of buildings. And some people could say, let the free market decide. If the zone allows different uses, let the owner of the building choose what it is based on what the market needs. I kind of get that. And the regulation could go against that in terms of trying to preserve a stable front of commercial uses to a building on a first floor. So I get that. What I'm saying is that for certain properties, including a few that I own in the downtown area, it doesn't work. For instance, 34 West Broad Street, the old Laura's Landing building, which I'm currently working on a historic project with a consultant and an architect, and I'm going to be seeing you guys really soon. But the plan for that building, which is really 2 buildings Siamese together, because it's an old building, like I say, there are nuances with buildings, is to put 2 residential units on the bottom floor on the left side. The front unit, that would be street facing, is designed to be handicap accessible. The back unit, because of the way the building grades off on that side of the building and the way the window heights are on the historic building, does not necessarily lend itself, if you extended that to one unit that went all the way from front to back to the building, to commercial use. You might say, well, it's the bottom floor of a building, it's been there since 1870, used to be an old mill, by the way. It was one of the oldest remaining vertical shaft mill buildings that's left in the downtown area. The problem is there's not enough parking in the building to do a large commercial use. There's a little bit of parking in the back. We'd rather use that for something else. Like, for instance, if you put a restaurant as you're facing it from the road, the right side of the building, and use that outdoor space for an outdoor area as opposed to using it for parking. So as a landlord, if I'd like to attract a large commercial use, like let's say Newport Restaurant Group, I want you to come down here and do what you do at so many nice restaurants throughout Connecticut, Rhode Island. They're going to say, I don't really like the property just yet because you don't have enough parking. It's large enough, you can put a nice outdoor area. I can see it, this building can be made nice. But right now, what you're going to get for that building over the next 5 years is at best a smallish restaurant with a nice outdoor area on the right-hand side. And we'd like to not leave that left side idle or get a use that isn't becoming of what downtown Pawcatuck should be because, you know, I don't want to put another smoke shop in there. I don't want to put a check cashing place that somebody will come in and put, you know, I want to put something nice in there. So what I'd ask the commission to do at this point in phase one, which is supposed to be about regulatory structure, about aligning with case law, and about compliance with state regulations, and strike 5.3.25.d from this draft because it's not really about those three things. This is a regulatory change. I think there's nuance to it. I think it needs more discussion. There are other landlords like me and property owners and stakeholders in other parts of the town which should weigh in on this. I would have weighed in on this, but I thought this was about structural change, statutory compliance, and case law. This isn't. Respectfully, that's, if there's any questions from commission members on this, on the nuances of this, please.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
May I briefly follow up on Jim's comments there?
Jim, I think we have a question here.
So I recall the meeting where we discussed the item that you're bringing up, and if anybody else can help me remember, we were trying to clarify something that was already in the regulations pertaining to this. Is there any way we can get access to what the original item that we were trying to clarify was?
Clifton?
Is Franco still on?
You know, during this process, we certainly didn't add any new regulation. And if it seems like that is the case, I think what it may have happened was that the commission was trying to disambiguate something or remove the commission's discretion in ways that could be legally troublesome on an issue. And I remember us discussing this particular item and not really being sure what the best thing to do was, but I seem to specifically recall that there was something in the regulations which needed to be addressed regarding it.
So Andy, if you take a look from a zoning regulation standpoint at that building, I guess you could go one of two directions. You could go residential mixed use, which I think this is the intent of this.
Well, I'm not trying to discuss that building. I'm just trying to discuss the phase one process.
I just want to put some detail just to give a real world example for the commission. You could go residential mixed use and use part of it as commercial, or you could go all residential with it. If you're trying to make money, that's probably the easiest way right now. But I don't think that's necessarily the best thing to just dismiss the use. And, you know, it's better for downtown to have some commercial areas. I'm not going to debate that. What I'm saying is, I think it's a little early to codify this in this phase one, and I don't think it's consistent with the intent of phase one.
If I may, and I think to Andy's point, I think we were trying to clarify something. I'm kind of remembering back. I'm wondering if we couldn't go back to maybe the recording of that hearing, or if there, you know, we can note the time when that was changed, so maybe we can get some better context of what we were actually trying to do. I don't believe we were trying to change anything fundamental. That's the whole point of this phase one, is not to do that, to put those kind of discussions to phase two. Right. But I think we can go back and try to maybe zero in on, okay, what were we trying to clarify, and what were we trying to clarify it from to what it is now?
Right. Again, I just think there's some nuance to this that the commission should consider, and perhaps this is better as a phase two item where there can be a little bit more robust public input, because...
Well, it certainly can be addressed in phase two, you know, and I appreciate the way you've articulated this, and we'll take it under advisement. I thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Are we having some audio problems here?
Yeah, we have some feedback loop that we need to fix.
Okay.
But in addition to that, we do have Francisco online, so I think once we finish the public hearing, we'll turn it to
Bring
him
him
for
back for
rebuttal.
rebuttal
Yep.
to address some of these points,
I think
yes.
that would be best.
I had planned on doing that. The next speaker who has signed up is Carlene. Evening.
Good evening, Chairman and the Commission. For the record, my name is Carlene Donnarummo. I've lived in the town my whole life. This weekend, someone said to me, "Are you going over those new phase one regulations?" And I said, "Yep, I sure am." And I had actually devoted 4 days of my whole life to go over these. But it didn't take very long for me to realize that what you did in a year and a half, I was not going to accomplish in 4 days. But I soldiered on and did as much as I could, but I did not get done. I also want to tell you that I did start attending your meetings on Tuesday nights, and then you switched them to Wednesday nights, on which I have a commitment that I'm not willing to give up. So I have not been able to attend all of your meetings. And therefore, there may be some questions that I'm going to ask that you've already made the answers to and made a decision about, but I don't know about. So please bear with me. I am no stranger to analyzing and proofreading regulations for this town. As a professional in my former life and my training, I am a business teacher, and I did plenty of proofreading during my career. And I worked with every single town planner since 1979 when we had new regulations to be put on the record as bad as Francisco might think they were, or they are. However, I do appreciate all the work that you have done as a commission and that the consultant has done. But I do have some comments, and I feel that they will enhance the regulations. And I'm going to present what I've done so far, and I hope you will consider them worthy enough to further enhance our regulations, and perhaps even encourage me to continue on if you feel my comments are worthy. So here we go. There seems to be a penchant for using acronyms throughout the document. You might at least put these acronyms after the name in the document. That is, we have ADUs and COSDs everywhere, but when the title is there, the abbreviation should be after it, and it isn't everywhere in the regulations. So I would suggest you go back and look at that and add that. We are all human, and so have these people been human who have written this up, but I did find errors. And I've listed pages and numbers, such as page 14, 5.2, where the sentence should end in an S. Another one, 19E1, where an A should be where it should not be. It should not be 1A, it should be A. 20B, the sentence would flow better if the word that was applied before the word apply. That were used before the word apply. Page 20G should be furnishing of. On page 21, there is an excessive of, word of. And when we get to hotels, I notice motels. In our current regulations, it says hotels/motels. Well, motels are not in anywhere in the new new plan, except as an exception in one of the in the NDD section. So what happened with motels? Did you decide that we're not going to have motels anymore in our town? I don't know. You better have a look. On page 25, the floor area ratio bonus is, I think you've completely changed the meaning of that regulation when you change the word may to shall. We know the difference between may and shall. Again, you need to look at that. Another one, very technical, there should be a colon at the end of that particular section. Oh, here's one of the biggies. On page 49 in the TC80 zone height in the graphs, it says the height is 508 feet. Maybe you've seen it already, but the 8 is supposed to be a superscript. And here's where I have asked and suggested before, and I don't know whether or not it's been changed in the drafts that Francisco has, because I've already mentioned it to Mr. Eiler, and that superscripts are not 1, 2, and 3, like a regular 1, 2, and 3 when they're at the end of the group. A superscript is in the air, and on the other ones, it was just plain 1, 2, and 3, and that is completely incorrect. Threw me for a loop, and I think it should be changed. And it may have been because I was going to suggest that the word index should be changed to indices because we're going to have more than one index. And that's been done. I saw it on the first page. So maybe there's hope. There are 3 word substitutions that I would suggest. I'm going to change, I would like you to change from where adopted to were adopted in another page. I'm going to give you a list of this, by the way. Anyway, and another instance of correct grammar, architecture style should be architectural style. And in page 2.33, I don't think that's a page number, it must be a number. The word section should be changed to district. So I've already talked to you about motels. You can read it on this page when you get it. Now I have some questions. On page 5 under 2.2.8, it is unclear what is being referred to in that section where it mentions 6.4. I don't know if it's means of PVC, the PV5 regulations. So that needs some clarification. And on page 12, 4.4.3, it seems like some of these things have been left out. Point 1 and point 2, you might want to look at that. Another question is, why was the word library left out? Library was part of the old regulations or our current regulations, and the word library is not there. So you might want to find out what happened to libraries we don't want anymore. And one other thing about kennels, commercial versus private kennels. Commercial kennels were not in the old regulations, but they have been added to the GB 40. Oh, that's supposed to be 130, sorry. GB 130 and the RC 120 zones. And I don't know why you did that. Maybe it was a discussion that you had. I did not know and did not see. When you get my paper, you will see to be continued after. And I really do need your guidance if I'm going to spend my time doing this, trying to help you out with my skills to make this a much better document. And let me know what you think. I'm going to hand you these comments that I made so you can look at them a little bit more thoroughly. So far.
I think I can speak on behalf of the whole commission when I say that we greatly appreciate the time that you put into this and the assistance that you've given us over many years. And it is taken to heart.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I live here. I care about our town. I love our town. And now I got everything on the ground.
Well, that is abundantly obvious. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Just, I think the reason that many of these changes haven't been implemented thus far is once something is posted in the town clerk's office and you start changing it, then you have to, you can't move forward with a meeting based on what you've posted. So it isn't that we have no intention of looking at the items that you sent us, but we wouldn't have been able to have this meeting tonight if we had changed one period. So they will all be reviewed and acted upon, and anything else that you do, like minor syntax errors after these are ultimately approved, can be made by the commission without another public hearing. So
That was one of my other questions. Shall I get up to the microphone?
yes, please.
Who is actually making the changes to this, if there are going to be any changes at all?
I think
Is it
it'll be the
you
consultant.
authorizing Cliff, or is Cliff authorizing Mr. Gomes?
It'll be an, you know, back and forth between the consultant and the planner. You know, Clifton has oversight on it, and it ultimately will, you know, be passed by the commission. But it will not require, for syntax type issues like this, which most of these things that you've talked about are, they do not require another public hearing. So, thank you again.
I would hope it wouldn't.
No, as do I.
It doesn't change the meaning.
Okay, next on the list is, I think I'm pronouncing this correctly, Kevin Bodler. Evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Badler. I'm also the chair of the Economic Development Commission, and I wrote you a letter. And first of all, I'd like to say congratulations to everyone who's been involved in this effort, because what you described as the goals and objectives is what I saw when I read through this phase 1 draft. And I've always struggled or get a brain freeze with the old regulations and try to figure out where I was. So I needed to go through a couple of the regulations near to write my letter, and the fact that you could see it in the index, I knew exactly where to go. When I went there, it was there, and I didn't have to get referred to 5 other parts of the regulations. It was just an amazing step forward. So, you know, I'm a pragmatic person. I would take this huge win in phase 1 and get it done. And where the rubber meets the road is going to be in phase 2. And it's phase 2 where Economic Development Commission has more interest. Our goals are to support businesses in town and to support homeowners or properties in Stonington. So as you know, 80% of our grand list comes from residences. So we're not a big manufacturing town. The residences and the property taxes that people pay on their homes is basically what keeps this town going. And I think that that homeowners should have the right to rebuild a home that currently exists on their ground. I know it's going to be quite difficult to get into some of these changes if we had a natural disaster and we lost large parts of, you know, Latimer and Lord's Point, etc. Also very supportive of increasing density. So whether it's with adjustments to ADUs, mixed use, you know, why not everywhere in a commercial district, higher density, you know, maybe higher heights, smaller lot sizes. So there's a lot of things to consider around how do we get more housing, including affordable housing, into Stonington. And we've already got a crisis with a shortage of housing, and it's not in any of our vested interests to actually allow for more housing. But if we don't, then we won't have a community that represents, you know, even parts of New England, and I'm worried that we'll become more and more of an elite society without having opportunities of housing across the whole spectrum. On businesses, so I mentioned both signage and parking. And it's quite interesting that we had a session tonight on signage, and part of the reason why signage is a problem is because our current regulations make no sense. To have a maximum 18 square foot sign when you've got a Big Y, you've got a Zachary, you've got Davis Standard, makes no sense. In my knowledge, limited knowledge as it is, of surrounding towns where you work on percentage basis, there's way smarter ways to do it so people don't have to come to planning and zoning and ask to spend your time or come and spend staff time on things which, if we thought about it a bit more broadly, or we compared to other towns in Connecticut, we could actually come up with regulations which will take 80% of the stuff away, and then you can focus on the 20% of things where you do really want to consider them on a case-by-case basis. And then second point, and I think we'll definitely, EDC will be involved in signage, and whether that's getting in cooperation, trying to get the chambers of commerce involved as well. If you look around town, there are pretty much no one's in compliance, but I don't hear anyone complaining about all the signs in the liquor stores, the signs on the side of the fish shops. So we've come to accept everything that is basically not in conformance with our current regulations, but I'd argue that it's really the current regulations which are more the problem. Parking, as I said in my letter, parking has been proved, and it was well intended as we put more and more regulations into parking, but it's been the #1 driver of collapse of downtown areas and of lack of reinvestment in those downtown areas. So whilst we thought, wouldn't it be smart if we stopped this and we stopped that and we don't allow that to happen, but what happens is basically it doesn't allow businesses to say, listen, the market should figure out whether people are going to come to my establishment or not. If I don't have a parking, I've got to make that decision, or I've got to figure out a way to do it without having regulations sort of step in and arbitrarily trying to think about every case and every scenario that is there. So, so we would take a much more permissive approach to, really eliminating minimums for parking as much as possible, and I'm talking about in commercial areas. Okay, so thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for the great work that you've done, because our life is already going to be easier once you adopt the phase 1.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for all the constructive input that you provide to us on so many of the applications that come before us. Does the presenter, either Clifton or Francisco, desire any rebuttal time?
I'd turn it over to Francisco if he had any specific rebuttals. But yeah. I would say I just reiterate what you said regarding the syntactical updates. All of those basic, very simple updates we can do without going through any sort of amendment process. If we're actually changing content of structure or meanings of sections, then that's where the commission would have the opportunity to approve with the amendment being that item. At the commission's discretion, but all of the other syntactical stuff, we can make a note of these and easily solve these, and I can work with Francisco to do that. So I'm not too worried about them.
Thank you, Clifton. Does anybody else in the audience wish to speak either for or against, or just make a general comment on this application? We are not going to act on this evening in light of the fact that we have received feedback. Francisco has talked to DEEP, but we don't actually have a formal response from DEEP. So we do obviously want to consider that major agency. And we mentioned earlier that we have not received responses, and we want to at least check with some of the other committees and task forces that have been empowered by the town to make sure that if they have input, we have that input, and there's still an opportunity for the public to comment on it. So, Francisco? Francisco, do you wish any rebuttal time at all, sir?
Yes, I'd like to address a couple of comments brought forward. First, starting with residential mixed use. And in response to, where did this change come from, and what was the prior regulation? So first of all, residential mixed use, this is a regulation that allows for a commercial property to incorporate residential development. And so it's intended for conversions. It doesn't limit a new construction from being organized and distributing residential as it sees fit. The existing regulations that are currently in force and that we've updated are very stringent with respect to the amount of residential that is allowed in a residential mixed-use conversion. By example, the residential component is limited to 66% or 2/3 of the building. The residential component has to be located above commercial uses, so commercial uses can't be located above residential. Furthermore, there is a limit of 10 dwelling units per any parcel. That's with the exception of the PV5 zone, where this particular use is allowed to be the most permissive. So there are a lot of conditions already in place that strictly limit the amount of residential, where it can be located in the building, and the total number of units. What we did is there was some ambiguity surrounding where exactly the residential could be located relative to commercial use. And the only guidance was that residential has to be above commercial, or residential can't be below commercial. So we provided some clarity to make it clear that it's the street frontage on the primary corridor that is the area to be reserved for commercial on the first floor only. In one way, to ensure that the rear of a building, the side streets of the building on the first floor do remain available for residential development. So once again, we did not add a significant restriction here. Rather, we were seeking to provide clarity to what we believe was the original intent of the regulations. And while as it reads, it is restrictive, we believe it falls in line with the original intent of these regulations and just provides more clarity, and may in some cases actually provide more opportunity if the regs had been or are currently interpreted in a more strict manner as to not allow any residential on the first floor. So that's my response to the question about residential mixed use. With respect to Carlene's comments, I very much appreciate her comments. I've been in communication with Carlene, and we've spoken on the phone on more than one occasion. And we have been responsive to date on any comments that we had received prior to filing this version with the town clerk. And as noted, we have not since amended what has been filed with the town clerk. She does point out a couple of syntax issues that we want to correct immediately. The 508 feet is most certainly not supposed to be a 508-foot height limit. It is supposed to be 50 feet, and that is supposed to be an 8 as a superscript. I've already corrected that in the source document, and we may in fact consider moving to an alphabetic-based system for that, so those numbers aren't in any possible way misconstrued and confused with the actual unit or value. So we will consider that corrected. With respect to hotels and motels, we had agreed to merge those into one category to treat motels as hotels. What we could do to provide more clarity surrounding that is within the definition of hotel, we can also say including motels. And there was clearly one location, and I did search the document, one location in the document where we failed to remove motel on the page that Carlene noted. Hotels is listed as a permitted use as well as motels. It's as simple as removing motels because that falls under hotels. And finally, with respect to commercial kennels, this is not something new that we've introduced. Kennels are already permitted we simply changed the name to commercial kennel so that it was not and is not confused with a hobby kennel or a kennel of dogs that someone might keep in their home. Otherwise, we have not changed the regulations surrounding that. Kennels of a commercial nature are currently allowed in the existing regulations. So that concludes my response. And as mentioned, we very much appreciate the feedback. My team has been diligent in providing quality assurance and quality control review of this document. And it certainly benefited from other sets of eyes that have caught these few remaining details that have escaped or eluded us. So thank you very much for that. And I trust that we can make these revisions within the next month. And with that said, I'll turn it back over to Clifton and you, the commission.
Thank you, Francisco. Does anybody who spoke in favor or opposed to the regulation, or just to make general comment, wish additional rebuttal time at all? Evening again, Jim.
About that. Start over. Okay. Jim Lathrop, with respect to the consultant, the language is more restrictive. It just is. Regardless of intent, you've added a restriction in this. However subtle, it will affect properties, saying it has to be forward-facing. You will drive people perhaps away from residential mixed use into 100% residential, which does not cover that regulation. It is not governed by that regulation. So I don't think this is a great idea, guys. So think hard about this one in phase one. Think harder about it in phase two. Think about that percentage requirement too. The 33% could go down. So they try to stay away from comments for the future. But regardless of the intent, and I heard what the consultant said, it is more restrictive. The language is more restrictive. It just is. It didn't say forward-facing before. It does now. So I don't know if that was the intent of phase one. It didn't sound like it was. That's what happened.
It was, I believe he said that it was ambiguous, and it was very difficult to interpret. And this was thought to be a clarification.
Yeah.
But I assure you, if you are a part of phase two, we can explore this further.
When you take something that's ambiguous and you make it added clarity to it, and by definition, that's restrictive.
Well, that's an interpretation, and we do take your suggestions under advisement. Thank you, Jim. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this application? No one else this evening. I believe we're going to continue this public hearing, so a motion to continue is in order.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to continue this public hearing.
Motion is made to continue. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Seconded by Gary. Thank you both. Any discussion on the motion?
No.
Hearing none. All in favor of the motion to continue?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I believe that concludes the regular portion of our agenda this evening.
Mr.
Thank
Chairman,
you
I make a
all
motion
for
to-
your participation, and thank you all for your fabulous input tonight. We appreciate you coming out to talk to us.
Mr. Chairman, I make a
So,
motion to close the
The
hearing.
motion is in order. Is the second?
Second.
The motion to adjourn is made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all again.